I'm embracing it. I'm the noise. We're noise now.
It's all good.
But you know what? That I was telling these guys. My wife had to come into the den twice last night because I was screaming at the TV. What did you feel like when you see your team move the ball like they did offensively? And like I mentioned to Brandon, he looks like that flower video in science that's instantly blooming and you're seeing him bloom. How does that feel for you, the gratification of, okay, this is good?
Well, it makes me feel really good for the kids more than anything. As much as we talk about, me being beat up, or I think he said punching bag reference. Like I'm an adult, right? I've been doing this 19 years. I've been on some really good teams as a coach. I've been on some really good teams as a player. I know how to kind of absorb criticism without having it affect the way I go about my day. These kids don't really know how to do that, and I think maybe Eric Daly mentioned some of that maybe last week. Like, they don't have the ability to hear it, see it, read it, whatever, flush it, not really give it the credence that maybe whoever the person is looking for, and be able to move on and be comfortable with what they're doing. So I felt best for those kids who went to Carbondale in early December and couldn't figure it out, and then went through this league several times on the road and had good moments, showed flashes, but haven't been able to figure it out, and then were told that they weren't good enough to do it ever. So the best evidence of being able to do something is to have done it before, and now we've been able to win a game on the road, and that hopefully gives them confidence. We got a couple left, but more importantly, winning 2 games in a row in this conference, and seeing the way we've had success consistently. One of the things we talked about on Monday when we got back together, in our losses, we're averaging less than 10 assists a game on the year, and in our wins, we're averaging almost 20. And how young guys also don't understand how to just accept that being the way you win, because they've always just been able to do it on their own. And this particular team needs each other, and seeing them continue to buy into that is what's most gratifying.
Is there anything in particular beyond the obvious that you're seeing from Jemiah right now in the way he's playing that's helping him play the way he is?
Again, confidence is probably the most underrated, valuable thing in sports. I mean, sometimes it's really that simple. The guy really believes. His ability, not just talent, but ability to deal with difficult moments. And I've seen it, with a lot of guys. I always talked about guys that are hardest for us to deal with from a scouting standpoint are guys that I think never worry about how bad the game's going. Trae Young came in here and shot almost 40 balls. I coached against Steph Curry. Like, those guys are nightmares to prepare for, because it doesn't matter. They think they're still, no matter what other 9 guys on the court, they're the best dude. And it's very rare now, because they're so much more susceptible to the criticism that comes with not playing well, that they don't have the strength and courage to just block it off and trust the work that they put in. And so I think his confidence is growing the more success he has. He does have the ability to block out. I don't know if he's at that level, right, with Steph and Trae, but the ability to overcome maybe a couple bad possessions in a game and still believe he can make the next play. And that's what you hope you can water as much as possible, because the game isn't perfect. I tell them all the time, I mean, we can put the schemes together. They're not going to work exactly how we practice them. I mean, I wish we were 13 for 13 in every half shooting free throws. I really do. I know that those guys go to the line every damn practice and every game trying to make them all. So you can't get bogged down when the results don't ultimately give you what you want. You just got to stick with the process, and he's done that so far this year.
I was wondering about a moment from last night, late there. You're up 3, you decide to foul. Just what kind of went into that decision from your end, knowing the way they rebound and all that?
Yeah, so a lot of the reason that I feel confident in what I do is because there's a lot of work and thought that goes into most every decision. Nothing's really just done on a whim. I'm not like married to the analytics, but I'm really kind of committed to enough data to make me feel good about it. And there were two things that I believe by last night. I'm gonna reveal some kind of inside baseball here. I made a mistake the possession prior. I told our team coming out of timeout at like 24 seconds that we were gonna get a stop. And when we got our hands on the rebound, which I thought would be in traffic on a miss, that we were gonna call timeout immediately. So I said, as soon as we get the ball, call timeout. We had 2 timeouts left, but they had the possession arrow. So my concern was, we get in traffic, they tie us up, they get the ball back. I didn't factor in them scoring. So they score. We inbound the ball. They're not pressing. We call timeout. So now we've used the timeout. We only got 1 left, and now we got a spot throw in. And so be clearer, right, as a coach. But the other part is 7 seconds or less, we foul up 3. It's just kind of been what we've done. A lot of things have to go against you in that scenario. You got to rebound the ball. Certainly, you got to make free throws. We had done both at a good level, not great. So I felt confident in playing the numbers in that scenario, and that's kind of what we do. So can always kind of lean in that regard. Not saying it'll be 100% of the time. I mean, if we're playing the 2012 Kentucky Wildcats with Anthony Davis, I'd probably say we're probably not gonna foul and do the rebounding game against those guys. But I thought we battled. We put a bigger lineup with Q and Daly and Garrison in there to help us finish the possession.
The cool thing, we asked Jamiron about that situation and about the execution of getting the board off the purpose miss by Cincy. He said, yeah, coach in the timeout told me to stand over here by this guy. And I'm thinking, why does coach want me to stand over here? He goes, then I watched the first free throw and I'm like, okay, I get this now. And then he perfectly executed going in and getting the rebound. So again, that's something you won't have to teach him again. He'll always remember that.
And there's some doubt probably in his mind.
He said there
hey,
was.
we don't. It's not what we do. I'm usually on the line. We pinch and we block out here. But they had 2 guys. I mean, you've been in basketball. They know they needed 2 seconds to go. It's not like they can, make the free throw and hope we miss and didn't have enough time, because now we got to inbound the ball. Sometimes it's going to run off the clock. And there was some even, again, when you haven't won, when you haven't had success, you aren't sure. You want to believe, right? But there was some like, coach, you sure we should foul? Yes, we should foul. Absolutely. Let's finish the game the way, we've planned all year, because we practice it. It's something we practice all the time, but we haven't been in that specific situation. So there was a little bit of, second guessing, which happens. But I was proud of the way they executed multiple things down the stretch. I mean, the back screen lob that we got for Keller, which we hadn't gotten in probably 6 games or so. Yeah. Great timing of it, great pass right on time, great screen. I mean, so many things have to go into executing those things that kind of get unnoticed because, again, most people see whether the ball went in the basket or not. I was just watching our last OU game. We shot the ball poorly as we shot all year, but we got, I don't know, we were 11 for 33 on layups and 3 for 18 from 3. I don't know how we were in the game, in all honesty. I mean, we guarded really well, but John Michael Wright took 5 wide open threes. Like, he has to shoot those balls. And some days, we miss them.
Yeah. Are you, with a group that's this young, now they've stacked 2 wins together, 1 on the road. Do you worry about they feel like, okay, we know that everything, I mean, or do you say, no, they're still hungry because they've had a lot of hunger built up?
Yeah, initially, right, you talk about, first of all, there's a balance, man. Like, they needed to enjoy last night. Like, that was what happened in the locker room. It was organic, but it needed to happen. Like, they needed to feel that exhilaration, and I want them to think about that moment and want it again and what it took to get there. But there's an element to today. My message was, when we show up for practice today, it's over. We don't get credit. There's no momentum carried over from game to game. The game's gonna be played very differently. So today, what I'm always interested is how our leadership shows up, and then how our young guys either follow or now know how to handle themselves through success. So I'm curious how we get to practice and what kind of focus we have for the next 48 hours or so.
Who is your leadership?
John Michael Wright's been phenomenal. I mean, and obviously with Bryce out, he hasn't been able to be as involved in that regard. He was really good for us early. But John Michael Rice really carried the water in that regard all year. Even when we were losing, I mean, he kept coming in talking about, "Why we're gonna get on a roll and win." The young guys don't know anything but what they hear from internally. That's why it's really important you have good kids, guys who really believe in what you're doing, and guys who really care about the right things and want to help. Because again, when you get on 6, it could go sideways really quickly if you don't.
Q started the year hot, and he had turnover struggles, fell out of the starting lineup. It seems like he's got going again. What have you kind of thought of his season?
Yeah, I mean, again, we talked about process, and I know you guys tired of me regurgitating the same thing, but I believe it. He speaks our language now. Like last year was Japanese. We were speaking English. He's speaking Japanese, even though he doesn't know Japanese. He thought what we were saying was Japanese. Now we're speaking the same language, but there's still a level of consistency that you gotta learn how to do it with. And you gotta deal with slumps or not playing well for a stretch of games, in whatever regard it is, whether it be shot making, whether it be blowing defensive assignments, rebounding, making free throws. And he's been able to fight through that. As a freshman, it's hard to fight through that. As a sophomore, you learn how to fight through it a little bit. As a junior, there's very few of those moments, and then hopefully, you get these guys in 4 years, and you look at what you see from Jamal Shedd and Jordan Roberts at Houston, right? They own the game. And so you start to see him just kind of mature and be able to accept, both the successes and the challenges that he deals with from game to game the same way. And as a freshman, you just ride the waves of emotion, depending on how you play.
After timeout last night, he was walking down the floor, hyping up the crowd that is not his crowd. Is it kind of good to have a guy who's, I don't want to say crazy, but
I don't want to say crazy either.
Is a little different.
To say. But I've had some unique characters.
Yeah. Is that good to have on a team, you think?
Yeah. I mean, there's always, yes. You need guys who are emotionally engaged. You need guys who, can balance that, emotion with some substance as well. Bryce Williams, as we all know, is kind of unique in that regard. Or Yornay had some of that. And so I've coached guys with that, Caleb Boone, but again, it was more emotional instead of like true substance throughout. So yes, you need that because the game requires it, especially on the road, that you have a kind of FU mindset, so to speak, that you believe in your group and what you're doing, but in a respectful way. I don't know if you say FU in a respectful way, but you know what I mean? Like you're really engaged with your guys and your teammates feed off of that emotion. So it's always good to have somebody who can bring that element to your team.
At what point did you know that Jamiron was capable of playing at this level? You guys offered him in the summer at some point. You said that you guys had a person at every game at the Peach. Just kind of, at what point did you know that this kid was?
So Coach Winter actually had been recruiting him kind of throughout his junior year. He has some connections, his high school coaches from New York. We don't know each other personally, but know a lot of similar people. And then the kids from South Carolina and some coaches. Sam Frederick, who I coached at South Carolina, is his older cousin. So there was some connections there. And as you watch him more, the more you see that there's just a competitiveness that I value. Because so much of recruiting is about like what works for the head coach and their philosophy. Talent's obviously got to be good enough, but there was a competitive element that I valued that I thought he could bring to us. Obviously, he wasn't super highly recruited. I mean, he was recruited by other really good programs and had great options, but I think that there was a connection he felt, with the relationships that we would, take care of him. It wouldn't be easy. We're very honest in the recruiting process, but I always thought the competitive element, which is a very, very high value for me, was something that I believe could develop into somebody that can help us win a lot of games at this level.
When he committed, he told me that you guys told him that in a year or a year and a half that you guys will need a point guard. I feel like most kids, that'll be a turn off talking about in the future. Does that kind of tell you that, okay, this is the kind of guy that we need, that he's okay with the process of it all?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of factors in recruiting and why you take a guy, why you may not take a guy. And having people who, again, I say it all the time, I want kids who come here to be eyes wide open. The last thing I ever want is to have anybody come here because they've been coerced into something that is not real, and they get here and it's a miserable experience because Coach Mike lied to me and said I was going to play 35 minutes a game and I was going to be able to shoot all the balls, or we got all these beautiful Morton steakhouses around town, and you guys will be able to go eat. Like, no, this is Stillwater, Oklahoma. This is a blue-collar program. This is what we're about. You earn everything you get, and I'm going to try to help lead you in the work that it takes to be good. And he was bought into that, and most of the guys we recruit here are bought into that. And that's why over time they learn to love it here, because it's real.
Do you think being honest in that pitch and giving guys kind of that truth has maybe turned off some recruits before?
Absolutely. We've lost a number of guys. I feel it sometimes in the conversation, and I'm always comfortable leaving the conversation knowing we may have lost them, if I'm being honest. I don't never try to turn anybody off. That's not the meaning. I mean, that's not the purpose of the conversation. The purpose is don't show up here with false pretenses. Don't show up here expecting to be handed anything. I remember sitting in my office, and Cannon Cunningham was sitting there with his mom and dad, and Cade was in there, and I told Cade that I didn't know if he would start here, and everybody kind of got uneasy. And I said, listen, I think you will. And I'm going to help work to make sure you have every opportunity to, but you're going to have to work just like everybody else in the program does. And so if the best player I've ever coached or recruited can accept that message and want to take that as a challenge to earn it and to then be a great teammate about it, then I don't see why I couldn't have that conversation with any other player.
And that's a perfect time to ask what I asked Brandon. I had a former OSU player on my show today, and he mentioned, we were talking about last night's game, and he goes, I could tell from last night, this next summer is huge for Brandon Garrison. If he will do the work, if he'll go out this summer and he goes, next fall you won't recognize him. He'll be, you think he's good now. When do you communicate that with guys? I know now's not the time for that, but how soon after the season do you start saying, you can't let your guard down? This is the time to pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as the season's over, we'll get with each guy and talk about what the process is and what's next. And everybody's conversation will be a little bit different, but there's no question. I mean, I think everybody with, decent vision even can see that there's real long-term potential here. And he's got a great work ethic. He has no idea, and it probably has worked in our favor so far. He has no idea how good he can be. None. I mean, no clue. And this summer, it's incumbent upon our staff to push him in a way that makes him grow, which means he's got to get uncomfortable. His body's got to change, not in terms of composition, but his endurance. Like, he needs to be the best running 6'9", 240-pound guy in the country next year. That's the challenge. So what does that mean? It means
a lot of work.
The weight room, diet, extra treadmill. Like, he needs to develop to be a guy who we can trust. And we can see a little bit glimpses now. Like, if he's open shooting a jump shot, everybody feels good about it. So yes, no question about it. Big summer for him, but for all these guys, because the summer is always about growth. And again, the retention word is a real thing. We gotta make sure he's here to do that.
With him, we talked a little bit about kind of the game-to-game challenges of a freshman preparing for all the different kinds of bigs that he sees.
Yeah.
You're kind of in a really weird swing right now from BYU to Cincinnati to OU. Is that one of the bigger challenges that a young big faces in Big 12?
I'm not sure I can even. I don't even know if I could really articulate it because I was never a big, but just having been around it enough, it's probably the hardest transition of any basketball player from like a point guard. Usually the point guards are the same size in high school and college. The wings, sometimes maybe a guy plays a forward, plays center in high school, but they're not usually playing against people smaller significantly. A lot of big guys in traditional high school always play against people so much smaller than them. And it's the first time they get to college and all these guys are the same size or bigger. And I looked out there last night, Jamel Reynolds from Cincinnati, I mean, he is huge. I looked out there one time and Marsh was out there and he's significantly bigger than Marsh. And I was like, I mean, you can't see it on film always. You can see the guy's kind of girth, but height was that was a good team we beat yesterday on the road. So to answer your question, yes, it's the biggest adjustment. It's the hardest adjustment. And then to do it over and over and over again, right? And it's going to be this way every game in our league. Is what you're so proud of him for, is that he started to get comfortable putting the physicality back-to-back games.
Q almost had a triple-double last night. And I guess just what do you like about his fit with this new lineup that's been out there the last couple games, the Jamiron, Devon, John Mike? Is Q almost kind of like that connector piece, I guess, between the other guards and then Brandon?
Yeah, in many ways, he's like the X factor. Again, Jamiron's play has been partly Javon being out there with him to take pressure off him playmaking all the time. It gives him the freedom to go be aggressive. Javon's a different kind of attacker. It's more cerebral, kind of more pace, and Jamiron's kind of a boom China shop. Q can help you both offensively and defensively switch, be aggressive on the glass. He's a really good rebounder for us, obviously. And he's kind of gotten out of the, I need to prove I can be a three-point shooter. He's got a good shot. That's not what we need from him. We need him to be a downhill driver, draw, dish, and create shots for John Michael Wright and Javon when he can. So certainly thankful he's grown into that role. I think it's also helped us use Daly in a different way. We play him as a 5 some, which creates some mismatch problems for the other team. So yeah, he's our most versatile piece for sure.
What makes a guy like him that's not one of the tallest dudes around such a good rebounder?
Just fearlessness. And I think oftentimes it's probably the biggest factor in good rebounders. It's just toughness and mindset and courage. Said it before, there's some tall guys who aren't very good rebounders out there. I've coached a few. But there's some guys who just don't mind, sticking their nose in there. And the truth is that's what we know. Some guys just come up with the ball and some guys don't. And it really doesn't matter kind of how close they are to it. Either they get close and it gets knocked off their hands, or they don't secure it, it gets knocked out of their hands. But he's a guy who secures it and plays with great force in the paint.
Connor Dowd going from starting to not really playing the last 2 games, is that help? Is that
not necessarily. He was one of the guys that was sick last week, but I think it's just more finding a good rhythm with the guys we've been playing the last few games. Again, typical freshman year, man. It's up and down. There was some times where he's been really, really helpful to us. I don't want him to get discouraged. I want him to continue to work. He was in today getting extra shots and watching film, so I'm confident that when his number's called again, he'll be ready to help us however he can.
Even though it went the way that it has, did you learn some things about what he can do other than just being a spot-up shooter?
Yeah, no question.